in the entire history of the NBA. No player has ever led the league in rebounds and assists in the same season. Not Magic Johnson, not LeBron James, not Oscar Robertson, not Wilt Chamberlain, not any of the players whose names get invoked every time someone tries to argue that the game was better in a different era. Nikola Jokic just did it in 65 games, while missing a month with a knee injury, and the Denver Nuggets got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. That combination of facts should stop you cold, because it is not just surprising. It is historically unprecedented in the worst possible way. No player in 50 years of NBA basketball has ever put up a statistical season like that and watched his team pack their bags before the second round. It has simply never happened, until now. So if you follow this league seriously, if you actually care about how basketball works at its highest level, the question you should be sitting with right now is not whether Jokic is good enough. That argument is over. The question is structural. The question is how does a performance that rewrites the record books and in a first round exit? And what does the answer tell us about the way this sport actually works? Because I promise you the answer is not what the mainstream coverage has been saying. Before we go any further, let us establish exactly what Jokic did this season. Because the raw numbers deserve more than a quick headline. 12.9 rebounds per game. That led the entire NBA. Every team, every position, every player. A 6'11" center who moves like a point guard finished first in the league in rebounding. 10.7 assists per game. That also led the entire NBA, a number that point guards the players whose entire job description is to distribute the basketball could not match. Jokic, operating primarily from the post and the elbow, out-assisted every traditional playmaker in the league. 27.7 points per game on top of that, in 65 games. Now here is the thing that most people gloss over when they talk about these numbers. Leading the league in rebounds and leading the league in assists are not just two impressive statistics sitting next to each other. They are almost geometrically contradictory roles. To dominate rebounding, you need to position yourself near the basket. You need to read the arc of a shot seal off your opponent and attack the glass from inside. To dominate assists, you need to operate as a decision maker from the perimeter, the high post. The elbow places where you can see the entire floor and distribute before the defense collapses. Most players spend their entire careers optimizing for one or the other. The idea that a single player could do both simultaneously, at a level that surpasses every specialist in the league, is the kind of thing that gets written off as impossible until someone actually does it. Jokic did it, and it still was not enough to get out of the first round, which means the problem was never where everyone thought it was, and that is exactly what this video is going to show you. Now let us put this season in context, because this is not an isolated incident. This is the second consecutive year that the Denver Nuggets have been eliminated earlier than their talent suggests they should be. Last year it was the first round as well. Jokic put up massive numbers both times. The result was the same both times. At some point, a pattern stops being a coincidence and starts being a diagnosis. Denver finished this regular season with a 54-28 record. They ranked first in the entire league in offensive rating. By almost every surface-level metric, they looked like a legitimate contender, the kind of team you build a playoff bracket around. And yet the moment the game slowed down, the moment Minnesota started implementing a specific defensive scheme designed not to stop Jokic, but to stop everyone around him, something in the Denver engine started to misfire. Possession after possession, in the fourth quarter of close games, the Nuggets were running the same action, getting Jokic the ball in his spots, and waiting to see if the players around him could convert what he created. Sometimes they could, often enough in the regular season to rack up 54 wins. Not often enough in a 7-game series against a team that had studied every frame of Denver film for a week. If you have been following Jokic for the last few seasons, and you have felt this creeping sense that something is off, that the individual brilliance and the team results are not adding up the way they should, you are not imagining it. The data backs you up completely, and if you want to understand exactly what the data shows, stay with me. Because we are about to look at the numbers that the box score does not show you. The numbers that explain everything about why the greatest statistical season, any, center has produced in half a century ended with a loss to Minnesota in 6 games. The answer is in a single on-off split that Denver has been quietly hoping nobody notices. And once you see it, the whole picture clicks into place in a way that is genuinely uncomfortable. Let us start with Chris Finch. Because what Minnesota did in this series was not about stopping Nikola Jokic. Any coach who has watched enough playoff basketball knows that stopping Jokic is not a realistic objective. You do not stop a player averaging 27, 13, and 11. You manage him. You make the game uncomfortable for him. in specific ways. And then you make absolutely sure that nobody around him can beat you. That was the entire game plan. And it worked. Here is what it looked like in practice. Every time Jokic caught the ball in his spots, his elbow up, his left block. His high post position, Minnesota sent a second defender immediately. Not late. Not after he had already made his read. Immediately before he could even set his feet. The goal was not to take the ball away from him. The goal was to force him to make a decision faster than his teammates could get open. In the regular season, that extra half second Jokic usually has to survey the floor is where all the damage happens. That is where he finds the cutter nobody else saw. That is where he threads a pass through a gap that closes in less than a second. That is where he turns a double team into an open three for a shooter in the corner. In this series, Minnesota took that half second away. And what happened next is where the real problem lives. Game 3. Denver runs their standard Jokic entry on 7 consecutive possessions in the third quarter. Minnesota doubles every single time. Jokic kicks it out. The receiver catches the ball with the defender already closing hard. The shot goes up under pressure. 4 of those 7 possessions end in contested misses or turnovers. Denver scores 3 points over a 4-minute stretch where their best player touched the ball on every single play. That is not Jokic failing. That is a defense that correctly identified the weakest links in the chain and systematically targeted them. Game 4. Second quarter, Jokic sits for 6 minutes, standard rotation rest. In those 6 minutes, Denver scores 8 points on 11 possessions. Minnesota scores 19, a 12-point swing in 6 minutes of regular rotation rest. Not a moment where Jokic got injured, not an emergency, just a standard substitution that every team makes 60 times a season. 8 points on 11 possessions, that is a historic level of offensive dysfunction for a team that ranked first in scoring during the regular season. Now here is the number that puts all of this in context. When Jokic is on the floor this season, Denver's net rating is plus 14.2 per 100 possessions. That is an elite number. That is championship level efficiency. It means that for every 100 possessions played with Jokic on the court, Denver outscores opponents by more than 14 points. When Jokic sits, that number drops to minus 8.2. That is a swing of 22.4 points per 100 possessions between when he plays and when he rests. To put that in perspective, the difference between the best offensive team in the league and the worst offensive team in the league this season was approximately 14 points per 100 possessions. The gap between Jokic on and Jokic off is larger than the gap between the best and worst offenses in the entire NBA. That single number tells you everything you need to know about how this team is constructed. But here is where it gets more specific and more damning. Minnesota did not discover this number during the series. They walked into Game 1 already knowing it. It is public information. It has been sitting in the advanced stats databases all season, and Finch built an entire defensive scheme around it make Denver score during Jokic rest minutes, pressure their second unit into bad shots, and trust that the deficit built during those stretches would be enough to hold late even when Jokic came back. It worked in 4 of 6 games. Now let us talk about Jamal Murray, because Murray is a genuinely good basketball player, and what happened to him in this series is worth understanding clearly. Murray averaged 25.4 points this season on 43.5% from 3. Those are real numbers. That is not a product of a flawed system inflating a mediocre player. Murray is legitimate, but here is what the film shows. When you chart every open 3 Murray attempted this season, the percentage that came directly from a Jokic pass or a Jokic-initiated action sits above 70%. Jokic draws the help, Murray spots up. Jokic threatens the roll, Murray relocates to the weak side. Jokic holds the defense at the elbow, Murray cuts baseline. In the playoffs, Minnesota ran a specific coverage on Murray in those situations. They chased him over every screen before the catch rather than after it. They denied him the ball in his preferred spots. They made him create off the dribble in isolation, which is a different skill set entirely from catch and shoot basketball. Murray shot 38% from 3 in the series, not a disaster, but not the player Denver needed him to be in the moments when Jokic was being doubled and the shot clock was running down. Aaron Gordon is a good role player and a quality defender. He is not a primary creator. Michael Porter Jr. is an elite spot-up shooter. He is not a ball handler who can generate offense when the primary action breaks down. When Minnesota disrupted the primary action, Denver had nowhere to go. This is not a criticism of those players as individuals. This is a description of a roster that was constructed around one engine so completely that when the opposing defense neutralized the conditions, that engine needs to operate. The whole machine seized up. What do you think Denver needs to change this offseason? Because the front office is going to face some very specific decisions in the next 60 days, and most of the takes you are going to see in the mainstream. Media are going to miss the actual problem entirely. Drop your answer in the comments, and then stay with me. Because we have not gotten to the part of this story that makes all of those roster decisions even harder than they already look. There is a comparison that nobody has made yet, and it is the one that explains everything. Draymond Green, Golden State Warriors, 2015 to 2018. During those 4 seasons, Draymond led the league in assists among forwards, pulled double-digit rebounds regularly, and functioned as the primary playmaker for one of the greatest offensive systems in NBA history. His numbers in certain categories looked similar to what Jokic just did, and Golden State won 3 championships in 4 years. Here's the difference. Draymond ran that offense alongside Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Kevin Durant, 3 of the greatest scorers in the history of the sport. When defenses collapsed on Draymond, they had to choose which elite scorer to leave open. There was no correct answer. Every decision the defense made was wrong. When defenses collapse on Jokic, they have to choose between Murray and everyone else. That is a decision with a correct answer. And Minnesota found it by Game 2. This is not about Jokic needing a player as good as Curry. That is an unrealistic standard for any team. This is about the difference between a supporting cast that punishes a defense for doubling, and a supporting cast that accepts the double, and tries to make the best of what is left. Denver's supporting cast, through no fault of the individual players, falls into the second category. Now here's the number that should be on the wall of every office in the Nuggets front office right now. Denver ranked 28th in the league in second unit scoring during the playoffs. 28th out of 30 teams. Only 2 franchises in the entire postseason got less offensive production from their bench than Denver did. And no team that is ranked in the bottom 3 of second unit scoring in. The playoffs has advanced past the second round in the last 7 years. Not one. That is not a soft trend. That is a hard structural ceiling. And here is what makes it worse. Denver currently sits above the first, apron in salary. They have over $260 million committed next season. Their tradable draft capital is nearly exhausted after the moves they made to build around Jokic in 2023. The financial flexibility required to add a second legitimate creator, the kind of player who can generate offense independently when Jokic is being doubled, simply does not exist in any straightforward way. The front office has known this for 2 seasons. The answer they have given is to trust the core, run the system, and hope that playoff experience compounds into results. It has not worked. Now consider what Jokic said after the series ended. He said twice without hesitation that he still wants to be a Nugget forever. No ultimatum, no trade request, no pointed comments about needing more help. Just a direct, unambiguous statement of loyalty from the best player in the world to a small market franchise that has not given him a realistic path to another championship. That loyalty is not naive. Jokic understands exactly what the situation is. He grew up in Sombor, Serbia, in a family that did not have much, and the values he carried out of that environment do not include demanding trades when things get difficult. He knows what Denver means to him. He knows what the organization has meant to his career. But here is what that loyalty actually costs him. And this is the insight that the mainstream coverage has completely missed. Every year Jokic stays in Denver without the right supporting structure. His statistical profile gets more historically extraordinary, and his team results get harder to explain. He is now 31 years old. The window in which a player of his caliber can sustain this level of performance is not infinite. The knee that cost him a month this season is a data point worth taking seriously. Centers do not age the way guards do, but they do age. His PIPM player impact plus minus, the metric that attempts to measure a player's total contribution to winning above a replacement level player, is the highest ever recorded for a center across a 5-year playoff sample. Higher than Shaquille O'Neal, higher than Hakeem Olajuwon, higher than David Robinson. By this measure across the most important games of the season, Jokic has been the most impactful center in the history of the sport. And Denver ranked 24th in clutch offense this season when Jokic did not have the ball in his hands. Those 2 facts sitting next to each other are the whole story. The greatest impact center in playoff history, surrounded by an offense that ranks in the bottom quarter of the league the moment he stops touching the ball. So here is the answer to the question we started with. Why did Nikola Jokic lead the NBA in rebounds and assists and still get eliminated in the first round? Because those 2 numbers taken together are not a trophy. They are a diagnosis. They are the statistical signature of one player filling every available role in an offense, because the infrastructure around him cannot generate points independently when the defense takes away his primary actions. Leading the league in both categories simultaneously should be evidence of a thriving system. In Jokic's case, it is evidence of a system that has quietly placed every load-bearing responsibility on a single point. He solved a problem the sport said could not be solved. He led the league in rebounding as a center while simultaneously out-assisting every point guard in the NBA. He did something that has not happened in 50 years of professional basketball, and the Denver Nuggets need to decide this offseason, with limited cap space and almost no draft capital, whether they are going to build something around that achievement that actually deserves it. Because Nikola Jokic already said he is staying. The question is whether the organization is going to meet him there. If you want a full breakdown of exactly what moves, Denver can realistically make this offseason given where their cap situation stands. That video is already in progress. Subscribe so you do not miss it when it drops. And if this analysis changed the way you think about individual statistics and team construction in the modern NBA, I want to hear what shifted for you in the comments, because this conversation is bigger than one player and one season.